It's not just my baby, it's our baby. The champagne flute slipped from my hand, shattering against the polished floor like the future I'd spent 2 years planning. My name is Claire Everett, 36, art gallery curator, and tonight, the woman whose sister just announced she's carrying my fiancé's child. The reception hall froze. 200 faces turned from Melissa's radiant announcement to find me, standing alone beside the gift table. My sister's words hung in the air between us, her hand protectively curved over her stomach, her eyes fixed not on her new husband but on mine. On David. I watched his face drain of color. The slight backward step. The involuntary glance at me before his eyes darted away. In that 3-second exchange, I learned everything. David started toward me, but I held up my hand. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning cycling on. Not here, I said, my voice foreign to my own ears. Steady. Almost casual. Your toast is beautiful, Mel. Congratulations to you both. I raised my empty hand where my glass had been, nodded to the horrified crowd, and walked, not ran, toward the exit. Behind me, chaos erupted. My mother's voice rose above the others, demanding explanations. My father's deeper tone, a warning. David calling my name. The wedding photographer's shutter clicking frantically, capturing the family implosion in high definition. The coat check girl stared as I approached, her eyes wide. She'd heard everything. Black wool coat, claim ticket 43, I said, placing the ticket on the counter. Her hands trembled as she retrieved it. I slipped her a 20. That's for your discretion. Outside, January air hit my face like a slap, the Chicago winter stealing my breath before I could decide what to do with it. I walked 20 yards from the venue entrance, just far enough that no one would immediately spot me if they came looking. My phone vibrated in my clutch. Then again. And again. I didn't check it. Instead, I looked up at the stars, barely visible through the light pollution. 6 hours ago, I'd helped my sister into her wedding dress, zipped up the back while she fretted about her vows, fixed her veil while she thanked me for being the best sister anyone could ask for. All while she carried this secret inside her. Claire. David's voice cut through the night. He'd found me. Of course he had, he knew me too well. Or thought he did. The man who'd proposed on the Pont des Arts in Paris 18 months ago, who'd selected a ring with a center diamond flanked by 2 sapphires because blue is your power color. The man who'd helped me plan our wedding for this coming spring. I turned to face him, summoning control I didn't know I possessed. His bow tie hung loose around his neck, his face flushed from either alcohol or panic. Possibly both. How far along? I asked. He stopped a few feet away, his breath forming clouds between us. 3 months. I did the math instantly. Thanksgiving. When I was in New York for that exhibition. I nodded slowly. My sister's husband's funeral was 2 weeks before that. It wasn't. David ran his hand through his hair. It happened once. She was grieving and I was comforting her? My laugh sounded like breaking glass. How extraordinarily selfless of you. Claire, please. He reached for me, but I stepped back. It was a mistake. I love you. We can work through this. Work through this, I repeated. My sister is pregnant with your child, and you think we can work through this with what, couples therapy? A strongly worded apology note? Behind him, the venue doors opened, spilling light and murmurs onto the sidewalk. Several guests peered out, curious vultures circling the aftermath. She's keeping it, I said. Not a question. His silence was answer enough. Congratulations, David. You're going to be a father. I reached for the 2.3-carat engagement ring on my left hand, the one he'd insisted on insuring for some obscene amount. I assume you'll want this back. No, he said, shaking his head. It's yours. I bought it for you. I don't want anything from you. I worked the ring past my knuckle, the first tears threatening as the platinum band slid free. I held it out. Take it. He didn't move. Claire, I'm begging you. Let's just go home and talk. Home, I echoed. Our loft in River North with its floor-to-ceiling windows and the antique drafting table I'd restored for his birthday. The vintage record player he'd given me for Christmas. The framed photo from the night we met, at Melissa's first wedding, ironically enough. There is no home anymore. You don't mean that. More people had emerged from the reception. My mother among them, her face a mask of mortification and fury. My father, his arm around her shoulders. And there, Melissa herself, supported by two bridesmaids, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. I felt suddenly, intensely calm. Like I'd stepped outside my body and was watching this scene unfold in a film, some melodramatic family saga I'd normally avoid. Yet here I was, the protagonist in her defining moment. I need to go, I said, dropping the ring into the pocket of his tuxedo jacket. Don't follow me. I turned and walked toward the line of waiting taxis, aware of every click of my heels against the pavement, every inhale of frigid air, every second of this new reality forming around me. Behind me, David called my name once more, then fell silent. The taxi driver glanced at me as I slid into the back seat. Bad night? I met his eyes in the rearview mirror. Just the reception from hell. Where to? I hesitated. Not home. Not to David. Not to any place connected to the life I'd just watched collapse. The peninsula, I said finally. I need a room for tonight. As we pulled away, I resisted the urge to look back. Instead, I watched the Chicago skyline grow larger through the window, the familiar building suddenly as foreign as my own reflection. At the hotel, I paid with my personal credit card, not the joint one. The receptionist eyed my evening gown but asked no questions as she handed over the key card. 11th floor, Ms. Everett. Would you like assistance with your bags? I don't have any, I replied. I had nothing but my phone, my wallet, and the clothes I wore. For the first time since I was 18, I owned nothing that connected me to anyone else. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. In the elevator, I finally checked my phone. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, voicemails from my mother, my best friend Kate, even one from Melissa. I turned the phone off completely. The room was impersonal and pristine. I kicked off my heels, unzipped my dress, and let it pool on the floor. Standing in my slip, I walked to the window and looked out at the city, a million lights, a million stories, none of them aware that mine had just changed completely. I ordered room service, a bottle of Macallan and a club sandwich I had no intention of eating, then sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, hands folded in my lap like an obedient schoolgirl. 3 months pregnant. My sister and my fiancé, the two people I trusted most in the world. My hands should have been shaking. I should have been throwing things, screaming, collapsing in tears. Instead, I sat perfectly still, mentally cataloging the steps I would need to take tomorrow. Call the wedding planner. Cancel the venue. Return the registry gifts. Update my Facebook status? The absurdity of the thought almost made me laugh. When room service arrived, I poured 3 fingers of scotch and carried the glass to the bathroom. I stared at my reflection, mascara intact, lipstick barely faded, hair still in the elegant updo the stylist had created that morning. I looked exactly like someone who'd just attended her sister's wedding, not someone whose life had just shattered. I raised the glass to my reflection. To new beginnings, I whispered, then tipped it down the sink. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of falling apart. Not tonight. Not ever. Back in the bedroom, I pulled out the hotel stationery and a pen. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Things I know for certain." Below it, just one line, "I deserve better than this." The room phone rang, startling me. The front desk. "Ms. Everett, there's a gentleman in the lobby insisting on speaking with you." "A Mr. David Chen. Shall I send him up?" I closed my eyes briefly. Of course he'd found me. This had always been our hotel, the place we stayed on special occasions when we wanted to pretend we were tourists in our own city. "No," I said. "In fact, I'd appreciate it if you'd inform security that I'm not receiving visitors tonight." "Of course, Ms. Everett." I hung up and returned to the window, watching the lights of Lakeshore Drive, the cars moving like blood cells through the arteries of the city. 3 years with David. 36 years with Melissa as my sister. Both relationships now redefined in a single moment. My phone remained dark on the nightstand, but I knew what waited on it. Apologies, explanations, justifications. Tomorrow, I would face them all. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of untangling my life from David's. Tomorrow, I would decide whether I could ever look my sister in the eye again. But tonight, in this anonymous hotel room, I allowed myself one small mercy, the right to process this betrayal on my own terms. The right to fall apart privately before I faced them with dignity intact. The right to mourn what I'd lost before deciding what to salvage. I picked up the pen again and added a second line to my list. This is not the end of my story. Have you ever had to rebuild your dignity in the aftermath of a public humiliation? I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, momentarily confused by the hotel room surrounding me. Then reality crashed back, the reception, Melissa's announcement, David's confession. I reached for my phone, finally ready to face the digital aftermath. The battery had died overnight. A small mercy. The clock on the nightstand read 9:17 a.m. In another life, yesterday's life, Sunday mornings meant David making his signature French press coffee while I read the Times. Now, I ordered breakfast from room service and charged my phone, watching it reluctantly power back to life. The notifications were overwhelming: 43 missed calls, 97 texts, countless emails, and social media alerts. I scrolled through them without reading, then stopped at a text from Kate: "I've got your back. Call when you're ready." Just that. No questions, no drama, no forced sympathy. I dialed her number. "Where are you?" she asked immediately. "Peninsula." "I'll be there in 30. Room number?" I told her, then hung up. Kate had been my friend since college, the person who'd introduced me to David at Melissa's wedding 5 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. While waiting, I showered, scrubbing away last night's makeup and hairspray. The hotel robe felt like armor as I sat by the window, watching the Sunday morning tourists on Michigan Avenue below. A knock at the door announced Kate's arrival. She carried a duffel bag and a determined expression. "Clothes," she explained, dropping the bag on the bed. "Toiletries. Your laptop. And this." She handed me a paper intelligentsia coffee cup. "You're a saint." "I'm a pragmatist." She kicked off her shoes and sat cross-legged on the bed. "Your place is surrounded. Your mother, David, even reporters from those gossip columns Melissa loves. Someone tipped them off about the announcement." I sipped the coffee, unsurprised. Chicago's art world was small. A scandal involving the Everett family and the curator of the Bennett Gallery would be irresistible fodder. "Did you know?" I asked quietly. Kate's face hardened. "If I'd known, I would have told you. And possibly murdered them both." I believed her. Kate had never approved of how easily Melissa moved through life, collecting admiration and brushing off consequences. "What happened after I left?" "Chaos," she said. "Your mother dragged Melissa into the bridal suite. Your father threatened to break David's jaw. The groom's family huddled in horrified clusters. The wedding planner had a panic attack in the bathroom. And the groom, Marcus, disappeared around midnight. No one's heard from him." I closed my eyes. Poor Marcus, 6 hours married to Melissa, and already dealing with a scandal that wasn't his to bear. How did we get here? I murmured, more to myself than Kate. But the question unlocked something, a memory from 5 years ago, the first warning sign I'd chosen to ignore. Melissa's first wedding had been at the Drake Hotel, a lavish affair with 6 bridesmaids in blush pink and a 12-piece orchestra. I'd been maid of honor, of course, standing beside her as she married James Harrison, investment banker and heir to a shipping fortune. The reception was in full swing when I stepped onto the balcony for air, overwhelmed by the champagne and the spectacle of it all. I wasn't alone. "Needed an escape too?" asked a voice from the shadows. I turned to find a man in a perfectly tailored suit, leaning against the stone railing. Handsome in an understated way, with intelligent eyes and the slight discomfort of someone who preferred smaller gatherings. "Just catching my breath," I said. "These Everett family productions can be intense." "Everett? You're related to the bride?" "Sister. Claire Everett." I extended my hand, which he shook firmly. "David Chen, friend of the groom." He gestured to the party inside. "Your sister knows how to make an entrance." "Melissa's speciality," I agreed. "She's been perfecting it since we were children." He smiled, revealing a small dimple in his left cheek. "And what's your speciality, Claire Everett?" "Keeping the peace, making sure the family name stays pristine. The usual oldest daughter duties, the responsible one." He moved closer, his arm almost touching mine on the railing. "And does the responsible one ever get what she wants?" The question startled me with its directness. "Sometimes," I said. "When it doesn't conflict with what everyone else wants." That sounds exhausting. It can be. We talked for an hour on that balcony. About art, his passion, about my work at the gallery, then just an assistant curator, about books and films and travel. Not once did he mention Melissa, or the extravagance of the wedding, or make the usual comparisons between sisters that I'd grown accustomed to deflecting. When Kate found us, her eyebrows raised in silent appraisal, she insisted we all exchange numbers. Claire needs more friends who can talk about something besides market forecasts, she declared. 2 days later, David texted to ask me to dinner. 3 weeks after that, we were officially dating. I fell for him because he seemed to see me, not as Melissa's sensible sister or the Everett family peacekeeper, but as myself, an art lover with her own ambitions, a woman with opinions and desires that had nothing to do with maintaining family harmony. Your sister is a supernova, he told me once. But you're the North Star. Constant. True. The one people actually navigate by. I believed him. Trusted him. Never once questioned why he'd been alone on that balcony during the most lavish wedding Chicago had seen that year. 2 years into our relationship, James Harrison died in a boating accident off Martha's Vineyard. Melissa was inconsolable, her grief raw and public. She moved back to Chicago from Boston, into our parents' Lake Forest estate, spending days in bed and nights crying on the phone to anyone who would listen, including David. She needs support, he'd explained, taking late-night calls from my sister while I pretended to sleep beside him. She doesn't have friends like you do. Not real ones. I understood. Or thought I did. Melissa had always collected admirers rather than confidants. Her relationships were performance art, dazzling but ultimately shallow. In her darkest moment, she'd turn to the people who'd always been her safety net, our parents and, by extension, me. And David, who'd become part of our family circle. The steady presence at Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings. The man who charmed my father with discussions of portfolio diversification and my mother with genuine interest in her charity work. 3 months after James's death, David proposed. On the Pont des Arts, just as we discussed during one of our early dates when I'd confessed my secret love of romantic clichés. The perfect ring, the perfect words, the perfect start to our future together. Melissa had been the first person I called with the news. Oh my God, she'd squealed, sounding more like her old self than she had in months. I need every detail. Was it romantic? Did you cry? Let me see the ring. I sent her photos, recounted the proposal verbatim, basked in her enthusiastic approval. It felt like having my sister back, the one who'd painted my nails before prom and helped me move into my first apartment. The one I'd grown up protecting and occasionally envying. We'll start planning right away, she declared. Spring wedding? You always said you wanted cherry blossoms. We're thinking a long engagement, I corrected her gently. Give you more time? To what? Get over James? Her voice hardened slightly. Life goes on, Claire. You of all people should understand that. I let it go, unwilling to dampen her renewed spirit with a disagreement. That had always been our dynamic. Melissa pushed boundaries, and I accommodated. She demanded attention, and I gave space. She acted, and I reacted. But something had shifted during her year of widowhood. The calls to David continued, even after she seemed to recover. Late-night conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Text messages he'd quickly dismiss as just Melissa being Melissa. She's latched onto our relationship, I told Kate over lunch one day. She's living vicariously through us. That's Melissa, Kate said, stabbing at her salad. When she's not the bride, she has to be the wedding planner. I laughed it off, but the unease persisted, especially when Melissa began dating again, introducing us to a succession of increasingly unsuitable men, each one more obviously wrong for her than the last. Until Marcus, quiet, wealthy Marcus Peterson, who looked at my sister like she hung the moon and seemed unbothered by her occasional meltdowns, who proposed after just 6 months of dating, offering stability and adoration in equal measure. He's perfect, Melissa gushed over celebratory drinks, doesn't talk much, makes fantastic money, and travels constantly for work. I'll have all the benefits of marriage with none of the day-to-day boredom. David and I exchanged glances over our cocktails. He squeezed my hand under the table, a silent acknowledgement of what we both knew. Melissa was making another mistake. But it wasn't our place to say so. I want you to be maid of honor again, she told me. And David can be a groomsman. It'll be like practice for your wedding. I agreed, of course. The responsible sister, the family peacekeeper. Always. The wedding planning consumed the next 3 months. Melissa insisted on my involvement in every decision, from flowers to fonts on the place cards. I gave up weekends, cancelled plans with friends, rescheduled meetings at the gallery to accommodate her demands. David grew increasingly irritated. "She's using you," he said one night after I'd spent 6 hours at a cake tasting that Melissa abandoned halfway through. "She doesn't care about your time or your feelings. She's my sister," I replied, the automatic defense I'd used all my life. "That doesn't give her the right to treat you like this." He was right, but old habits die hard. I continued to say yes when I wanted to say no, to smooth ruffled feathers when Melissa offended yet another vendor, to write checks from my personal account when the wedding budget mysteriously couldn't cover essential upgrades. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I received a text from my mother, "Need you at the house." Melissa crisis. I found my sister in her old bedroom, surrounded by tissue paper and lingerie, sobbing into a glass of champagne. "I can't do this," she wailed when she saw me. "I'm not ready. James has only been gone 18 months. What am I thinking?" I sat beside her on the bed, careful not to disturb the carefully arranged trousseau. "You're thinking you found someone who makes you happy," I said. "That's not a betrayal of James. But what if I'm making a mistake? What if Marcus isn't the one? Then you'll figure it out together. Or you won't. But you won't know unless you try." She looked at me through tear-spiked lashes. "When did you get so wise about relationships?" "I had a good teacher," I said, thinking of David and his patient guidance through my own insecurities. Melissa reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly tight. "Promise you'll always be there for me. No matter what happens." "I promise," I said, the words as familiar as breath. "You're my sister." She hugged me fiercely, her tears soaking my shoulder. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. I should have paid more attention to those words. 6 weeks after that conversation, while I was in New York for a major exhibition, Melissa spent Thanksgiving at David's apartment. For comfort, he would later claim. My sister and my fiancé, the foundations of my life, shifting beneath me while I negotiated for a Basquiat piece 3 states away. The irony is, I'd called that night 3 times. Each call went to voicemail. Probably at a movie, I told myself, or asleep early with that cold he mentioned. Never once did I imagine the truth. Have you ever realized that the moment you missed a crucial sign was actually the moment you chose trust over suspicion? 3 days at the peninsula stretched into a week. I'd called the gallery, arranged for emergency leave, forwarded my work email to my assistant, ordered new clothes from the hotel boutique, created a temporary life in this liminal space while ignoring the storm raging outside. Kate visited daily, bringing news and necessities. My parents had left 7 increasingly frantic voicemails. David had been spotted sleeping in his car outside my condo. Melissa had checked into Northwestern Memorial with pregnancy complications that my mother insisted were stress-induced. "You can't hide forever," Kate said on day 8, curled in the armchair while I stared out at the lake. "I'm not hiding," I replied. "I'm processing." In truth, I was building armor. Each hour of silence strengthened my resolve. Each declined call reinforced my boundaries. I wasn't ready to face them, but I was getting closer to knowing what I wanted when I did. My phone buzzed with a text from my father, "Need to talk. Neutral ground. Piccolo Sogno. 1 p.m. tomorrow. Just us." I showed Kate the message. "Are you going?" she asked. "Yes," I decided. Dad's the only one who hasn't tried to manipulate me this week. The next day, I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, choosing a table in the garden with clear sightlines to both exits. Old habits from a childhood of Melissa wrangling, always position yourself to intercept trouble. My father appeared precisely at 1, his silver hair immaculate, his Brooks Brothers suit a shield against vulnerability. Thomas Everett, commercial real estate developer, civic leader, and reluctant patriarch of our fractured family. Claire. He kissed my cheek before sitting down. "You look well." A lie, but a kind one. I hadn't slept properly in 9 days. "How's Mom?" I asked after we'd ordered. Distraught. Oscillating between fury at Melissa and concern for her condition. He adjusted his silverware with precision. "She wants to fix this. Some things can't be fixed." Perhaps. But they can be managed. His eyes, so similar to mine, held steady. Melissa's made a mess. Again. The question is how we proceed. This was quintessential dad, practical, strategic, always looking for the cleanest extraction from a crisis. What's your proposal? I asked. Melissa keeps the baby. David provides financial support but otherwise stays out of the picture. You and David take some time apart, then reconcile. We tell people it was a misunderstanding, Melissa's emotional announcement, ambiguous phrasing. By the time the child is born, the story becomes that Marcus is the father. I stared at him, disbelieving. You can't be serious. It's the most sensible solution, he continued, unperturbed. Melissa's marriage stays intact. Yours proceeds as planned. The family avoids prolonged scandal. And the truth? The truth, he said quietly, is often a luxury we can't afford. Our salads arrived, giving me a moment to collect my thoughts. The Everett family way, appearance over authenticity, image over honesty. I'd participated in this system my entire life, cleaning up Melissa's messes, maintaining our carefully constructed facade. What does David think of this plan? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He's amenable. Relieved, actually. He doesn't want to lose you. And Melissa? Dad hesitated. She's complicated right now. The pregnancy hormones aren't helping. But she'll come around. I set down my fork. And what about what I want? What do you want, Claire? He asked, genuinely curious. I'd been asking myself the same question for 9 days. The answer crystallized as I spoke. I want the truth acknowledged. I want consequences for actions. I want a life that isn't built on lies. Noble sentiments, he said, not unkindly. But consider the practical realities. A public split with David means dividing assets, canceling wedding plans, fielding questions for years. Ongoing tensions at family gatherings. Melissa's child growing up in the shadow of scandal. You mean your grandchild, I corrected. He flinched slightly. Yes. You've already accepted this, haven't you? That David and Melissa betrayed me, that they're bringing a child into the world through deception, and that the solution is to paper over it all and continue as if nothing happened. I've accepted that people make mistakes, he replied. Even terrible ones. And that sometimes, forgiveness is the only path forward. Forgiveness requires remorse, I said. Have either of them actually apologized? Or are they just scrambling to minimize consequences? Dad didn't answer, which was answer enough. I need to hear them say it, I decided. Face to face. No more hiding, from any of us. He nodded slowly. I can arrange that. Tomorrow? The lake house. Neutral territory. The lake house, our family's summer retreat in Michigan, where we'd spent countless weekends pretending to be the perfect family. Where Melissa and I had shared a room with twin beds and whispered secrets after lights out. Where David had first said he loved me, standing on the dock under a meteor shower. Tomorrow, I agreed. The drive to Michigan the next morning gave me time to prepare. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain calm, how I would listen without interrupting. Professional Claire, gallery curator Claire, who could handle difficult artists and demanding donors with equal composure. The lake house came into view as I rounded the final curve, cedar shingles weathered gray, wide porch with white rocking chairs, dock extending into the still water. My mother's car was already in the gravel drive, alongside David's Audi and my father's Mercedes. No escape route, then. I was outnumbered. I pulled up beside them and cut the engine, sat for a moment, gathering strength. Then grabbed my purse and walked to the front door without allowing myself to hesitate. Mom opened it before I could knock. Claire, she breathed, reaching for me. I stepped past her embrace. Let's get this over with. They were assembled in the great room like actors waiting for their cues. Dad by the fireplace, David on the edge of the sofa, Melissa in the window seat, one protective hand on her still flat stomach. Claire. David stood immediately. Thank God you're here. Sit down, I said quietly. All of you. Surprisingly, they complied. Even my mother, who rarely took direction from anyone, settled into an armchair. I remained standing, needing the physical advantage. I've spent 10 days thinking about what happens next. About what I can live with, and what I can't. But before I make any decisions, I need to hear from both of you. I looked between David and Melissa. The complete truth. No more lies. I'll start, David said, leaning forward, eyes earnest. What happened with Melissa was a mistake. One night, one terrible lapse in judgment. I was comforting her. Spare me the euphemisms, I interrupted. You slept with my sister while I was out of town. Just say it plainly. He swallowed hard. Yes. We slept together once. I've regretted it every day since. When did you find out about the pregnancy? 2 weeks ago, he admitted. Melissa called me, told me she needed to talk in person. When we met, I showed him the test results, Melissa cut in, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I didn't know what to do. Marcus was away, and I was scared. So you decided the appropriate next step was to announce it at your wedding reception? I asked, ice in my voice. That wasn't planned, she insisted. I'd had champagne, more than I should have, and when they handed me the microphone for my speech, I couldn't keep pretending everything was perfect. Because that's my job in this family, isn't it? Keeping up appearances while you do whatever you want? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I never meant to hurt you. Bullshit. The word hung in the air between us. You've been competing with me your entire life. Taking what's mine, testing boundaries, seeing what you could get away with. David was just the ultimate trophy. That's not fair, she protested weakly. What's not fair is that you're carrying my fiancé's child. What's not fair is that I spent 3 years building a life with a man who could betray me so easily. What's not fair is that I'm expected to either forgive this or become the villain in our family's story. My mother made a small sound of distress. No one thinks you're the villain, darling. Don't they? I turned to her. Dad's solution is that I reconcile with David and we all pretend this never happened. That's not protection, that's punishment. I just want what's best for all of you, my father said. No, you want what's easiest. There's a difference. David stood again, moving toward me. Claire, please. We can work through this. I made one horrible mistake, but I love you. I want to marry you. I want our life together. I looked at him, really looked at the man I'd planned to spend my life with. The slight tension around his eyes. The careful distance he maintained from Melissa. The way he kept glancing at my father for support. You haven't once asked what I want, I realized aloud. None of you have. You've been too busy crafting the narrative that best serves your needs. What do you want? David asked, desperation edging into his voice. I took a deep breath. I want a divorce. We're not married yet, he said, confusion clouding his features. Not from you. From this, I gestured around the room, at the people who'd shaped my life through expectations and obligations. From the role I've played in this family. The responsible one. The fixer. The one who sacrifices her needs for everyone else's comfort. Silence fell, heavy with comprehension. Claire, my father began, you're upset, understandably so, but I'm not upset. I'm awake. I turned back to David and Melissa. Here's what happens next. I'm selling my stake in the condo to David at market value. I'm taking a sabbatical from the gallery. I'm changing my phone number, and I'm going to Paris for the artist residency program I was invited to join last year but declined because it conflicted with our wedding date. For how long, my mother whispered. 6 months, initially. After that, I don't know. And us? Melissa asked, her hand still protectively curved around her abdomen. Will you ever forgive us? I studied my sister, the person I'd protected and resented in equal measure for 36 years. The girl who'd broken my toys and stolen my spotlight and now carried my future in her body. Forgiveness isn't a single decision, I said finally. It's a process. One I'm not ready to begin yet. Maybe someday, but not today. I shouldered my purse, suddenly desperate for air. My lawyer will contact you both next week. Till then, please respect my space. No one tried to stop me as I walked out. No dramatic protests, no tearful pleas. Just the weight of realization settling over the room, that for the first time in my life, I was choosing myself over family harmony. As I drove away, I caught a final glimpse of the lake house in my rearview mirror, shrinking into the distance. For 3 decades, I'd believed my role was to maintain peace at any cost. Now I understood that some forms of peace were just surrender in disguise. Have you ever discovered that walking away from a negotiation was more powerful than any compromise you could have reached? Paris in January welcomed me with gray skies and bone-chilling dampness that penetrated my wool coat as I dragged my suitcase along cobblestone streets. The tiny fifth-floor apartment in the Marais district was a far cry from my sleek Chicago condo: creaky wooden floors, ancient plumbing, a kitchenette barely large enough to turn around in. But it was mine, secured with my own money, unconnected to the Everett name or gallery connections. I spent the first 3 days in methodical organization. Unpacked my single suitcase, purchased essentials from neighborhood shops, located the nearest cafe, grocery store, pharmacy, introduced myself to the residency program director, who showed me to my studio space, a light-filled room with high ceilings and paint-splattered floors in a converted textile factory. On the 4th day, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Sitting at a cafe table, warming my hands around a cafe creme, I felt the first fragile tendrils of peace unfurl in my chest. No one here knew my story. No one watched for signs of breakdown or recovery. No one needed me to maintain the appearance of familial harmony. My new phone contained only 5 contacts: Kate, my lawyer, the gallery assistant handling my clients, the residency director, and the building superintendent. My new email address received only work-related correspondence. My social media accounts remained deactivated. It wasn't hiding, it was breathing space. Room to discover who Claire Everett might be without the weight of others' expectations. The program introduced me to 11 other artists from around the world: a Japanese ceramicist, a Brazilian photographer, a South African sculptor. We gathered weekly for critiques and occasional group dinners, forming cautious friendships based on respect for each other's work rather than personal histories. "You're very private," observed Nadia, the photographer, during our 3rd group dinner. "Even your art gives nothing away." I was curating an exhibition of abstract expressionist pieces, maintaining professional focus rather than creating personal work. "I prefer to let the artists speak for themselves," I replied. "But you're an artist too, no?" "We all are, or we wouldn't be here." I smiled without answering, changing the subject to her latest photographic series. Another skill honed over years of deflecting attention from Melissa's dramas: redirect, refocus, remain pleasant but firm. 6 weeks into my Parisian exile, I received an email from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "You deserve to know the whole truth." I almost deleted it without reading, assuming it was David or Melissa using a new account to bypass my filters. But something, curiosity, perhaps, or that curator's instinct for important details, made me open it. "Claire, we've never formally met, though I've seen you at several Chicago gallery openings. My name is Angela Reeves. I worked with David at Armstrong Partners until 3 months ago. I've debated sending this email for weeks. It's not my place to insert myself into your personal situation, but after what happened at your sister's wedding, which is unfortunately common knowledge in certain circles, I feel you deserve the complete truth." David and Melissa's encounter was not a one-time mistake. They've been involved intermittently since shortly after her first husband's death. I know this because David occasionally used my apartment as their meeting place when you were traveling for work. I'm not proud of my role in facilitating their deception, and I've since left the firm partly due to the uncomfortable position it put me in. David explained it as comforting a friend in grief at first, but that excuse wore thin as months passed. I'm sorry to be the bearer of more painful news. If you wish to verify any of this, I've saved text messages where David arranged to use my place. I can forward them to you. You don't know me, and you have no reason to trust me, but I hope this information helps you move forward with clarity, whatever path you choose. Angela. I read the email 3 times, my coffee growing cold beside my laptop. Then I closed my computer, put on my coat, and walked for hours along the Seine, watching tourist boats slide beneath bridges while winter sunlight glinted off the water. A year-long affair. Not a single moment of weakness. A deliberate, sustained deception. I thought of all the business trips David had taken while I was home in Chicago. All the late nights at the office during Melissa's difficult period. The weekends spent helping his parents when I was too busy with gallery obligations to join him. Countless opportunities for betrayal, disguised as consideration. By the time I returned to my apartment, darkness had fallen over Paris. I opened my laptop again and replied to Angela with a single sentence: "I would appreciate seeing those messages." They arrived 10 minutes later, dozens of exchanges spanning 14 months. David requesting Angela's apartment key. Coordinating timing. thanking her for discretion. Occasional references to M and scheduling around C's travel. The final message dated just 3 weeks before Melissa's wedding. Physical evidence of what I'd already accepted emotionally. David had never been the man I thought he was. I forwarded the entire exchange to my lawyer with instructions to use it in our settlement negotiations if necessary. Then I blocked Angela's address, closed my laptop, and opened the bottle of Bordeaux I'd been saving for some unspecified celebration. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since the wedding. 3 days later, my new phone rang with Kate's ringtone, our arranged weekly check-in. Update from the home front, she said without preamble. Melissa's gone public with the pregnancy. Chicago Social has a spread on the newlywed glow and her excitement about starting a family with Marcus. And Marcus is playing along? I asked, genuinely surprised. Seems that way. Standing by her in photos, hand on her stomach, the whole performance. Your father must have made him an offer he couldn't refuse. The Everett family way, financial solutions to emotional problems. There's more, Kate continued. David's looking for you. Showed up at my apartment last night, completely desperate. Said he needs to explain something before you hear it from someone else. My hand tightened around the phone. Did you tell him anything? Of course not. But Claire, he knows about the residency. Not specifically where you are, but that you're in Paris. He's threatened to call every program in the city until he finds you. Let him try, I said. The director knows not to confirm my presence to anyone. He seemed genuinely panicked. Whatever he wants to tell you, he's afraid of you hearing it elsewhere. I smiled grimly. Too late. His colleague Angela already filled me in on their year-long affair. Kate's sharp intake of breath carried across the Atlantic. Jesus, Claire. Are you okay? Oddly, yes. It's easier knowing it wasn't just one mistake. That I'm not overreacting by walking away. I'm so sorry. Don't be. I needed the truth. I hesitated. How's Melissa? Really? Physically fine, according to the grapevine. Emotionally? Who knows? Your mother's thrown herself into planning the nursery. Your father's handling the financial arrangements. The perfect Everett family crisis management strategy, ignore the mess, focus on practical details. And David? Drinking too much. Looking terrible. Telling anyone who'll listen that it was all a misunderstanding. I felt nothing, no satisfaction at his suffering, no lingering pain at the mention of his name. Just a distant acknowledgement of facts about someone who once mattered to me. Claire, Kate said softly. Your mother called me yesterday, asked if I could convince you to call her. She's worried about you. I'm fine. I know that. But maybe, not yet, I interrupted. I need more time. After we hung up, I stood at my apartment window, watching Parisian life unfold on the narrow street below. An elderly man walking his miniature poodle. 2 women laughing outside the boulangerie. A delivery cyclist navigating between parked cars. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Claire, it's Dad. Please call. Important family matter to discuss. Not about David or Melissa. I stared at the message, feeling the familiar tug of obligation. All my life, important family matter had been the summons I couldn't ignore. The code that pulled me from whatever I was doing to manage another crisis, smooth another conflict, maintain another facade. Before I could decide how to respond, a second message appeared. Your grandmother's health has declined. Doctors say weeks, possibly days. She's asking for you. Grandmère Jacqueline. My father's mother, the French expatriate who'd taught me to appreciate impressionist paintings and good cheese, who'd taken me to Paris for my 16th birthday while Melissa stayed home with a conveniently timed flu, who'd whispered ne laisse personne diminuer ta lumière, don't let anyone dim your light, when I left for college. The one family member who'd never compared me to Melissa, never assumed I'd sacrifice my needs for family harmony, never treated me as a supporting character in someone else's story. I closed my eyes, suddenly overwhelmed. Was this truth or manipulation? Genuine urgency or calculated leverage to pull me back into the family orbit? A third message appeared. She doesn't know about the situation with Melissa and David. We've kept it from her to avoid distress. Of course they had. Another family secret, another reality carefully managed for someone else's comfort. I could almost hear my father's voice. There's no need to upset her with family drama at this stage. I set the phone down without responding and walked to the small desk where I kept my sketchbook. Grandmere had given it to me before I left Chicago, pressing it into my hands with a knowing look. "For when you're ready to make your own art again," she'd said. I'd been using it to make notes for the exhibition, keeping my creative impulses firmly channeled through others' work. Now I opened to a blank page and began to draw, not gallery notes or curatorial concepts, but fluid lines forming a woman's face. My grandmother's face, with its elegant cheekbones and knowing eyes. The face that had always seen me clearly, even when I couldn't see myself. By midnight, I'd filled 10 pages with sketches, memories of Jacqueline in her garden, at her piano, standing before the paintings she loved at the Art Institute. The woman who'd shaped my aesthetic sensibilities and encouraged my independence, even as the rest of the family pushed for conformity. If she truly was dying, did I owe her a final visit? Or was that just another chain pulling me back to a role I'd finally escaped? I picked up my phone again. No new messages from my father. Instead of responding to him, I texted Kate, "Need a favor. Can you verify Grandmere's condition?" Directly, not through family. Her response came quickly, "On it. We'll call her doctor tomorrow with the consent form you signed last year." After Grandmere's minor stroke, I'd become her medical proxy, another responsibility I'd accepted without question. Now it might provide unfiltered information. I returned to the window, watching the now empty street below. Paris slept, oblivious to my dilemma. I'd come here to escape family obligations, to rediscover myself beyond the role of responsible daughter and sister. But if Grandmere truly needed me, could I ignore that call in the name of self-protection? The boundaries I'd so carefully constructed suddenly seemed permeable, conditional. The truth I'd insisted upon now complicated rather than clarified my path forward. Have you ever noticed how the people who taught you to stand up for yourself are often the ones who make it most difficult to stand against family pressure? Kate's verification came the next morning. Grandmere Jacqueline had pneumonia, complicated by her existing heart condition. Prognosis, guarded. Not necessarily terminal, but certainly serious for a woman of 84. "The doctor says she's asking for you," Kate confirmed. "But she's stable enough that you have a few days to decide." I booked a flight to Chicago for the following week, giving myself 7 days to prepare mentally, 7 days to strengthen my boundaries before re-entering the Everett family orbit. The studio became my sanctuary. I abandoned the exhibition preparations and focused solely on my own work, raw, expressive paintings inspired by Grandmere's stories of post-war Paris, memories she'd shared only with me, deeming Melissa too young or too restless to appreciate them. By the 5th day, I'd created 6 large canvases, emotional landscapes rather than literal scenes. The residency director stopped by during my afternoon session, observing silently before saying, "Now we see the real Claire Everett." I wiped paint-stained hands on my apron. "I'm not sure who that is yet. That's the point of creating, no? To discover." She gestured to the largest canvas, where fierce strokes of indigo cut through fields of burnt sienna. "This isn't curator Claire organizing others' visions. This is your voice." That night, I carefully photographed each painting, then created a private online portfolio visible only with a direct link. I sent that link in an email to Grandmere's personal iPad with the subject, "What I've been making in Paris." No message, no explanation. Just the visual evidence of my transformation. If she was well enough to view them, she would understand what I couldn't yet express in words. 2 days before my scheduled flight, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. "Claire, it's Marcus. We need to talk before you return to Chicago. Can we arrange a call?" Marcus Peterson, Melissa's new husband, unwitting stepfather to my fiancé's child. The bystander in our family drama, whom I'd barely considered in my focus on personal betrayal. I stared at the message, curiosity warring with caution. What could he possibly want to discuss? A plea for family reconciliation? Financial arrangements for the child? Warning me away from stirring up more scandal? Against my better judgment, I replied, "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. your time." His call came precisely on schedule. "Claire? Thank you for speaking with me." His voice sounded different from what I remembered, harder, more assertive than the quietly accommodating man who'd stood beside Melissa at the wedding. "What can I do for you, Marcus?" I kept my tone neutral. "I'll be direct. I know the baby isn't mine. No emotion, just statement of fact. I've known since before the wedding that Melissa was seeing someone else. I didn't know it was David until the reception. Then why go through with the ceremony? I asked, genuinely curious. Business considerations. The merger between my family's holdings and your father's development company was contingent on our marriage. I sank onto my bed, piecing together the implications. An arranged marriage? In 2025? A strategic alliance with romantic window dressing, he corrected, which worked for me. I'm not interested in traditional relationships, and Melissa's public-facing charm is an asset in my circles. We had an understanding that discretion was expected from both sides, until she announced her pregnancy to 200 guests. Yes. A hint of irritation cracked his corporate veneer. That was not part of our arrangement. So why are you calling me? Because I'm invoking the morality clause in our prenuptial agreement. Melissa's public infidelity has triggered financial penalties she didn't anticipate. Your father is negotiating to minimize her losses, but I thought you should know the complete situation before you arrive. My head spun with the cold calculation of it all. Why tell me this? Professional courtesy. We're both victims of Everett family manipulation, though in different ways. A pause. And because I respect your decision to walk away. It took courage. Thank you, I said automatically, processing his revelations. What happens now with you and Melissa? We maintain appearances through the pregnancy for mutual benefit. After that, a quiet divorce. The merger remains intact regardless. The business-like disposal of my sister's fairy tale second marriage should have shocked me. Instead, it felt like the removal of another illusion. The myth that Melissa's charmed life was built on anything more substantial than performance and convenience. I appreciate the information, I said finally. And your honesty. We deal in different currencies, Claire. Your family trades in emotional manipulation. I prefer straightforward financial transactions, less messy. After we disconnected, I stood at my window for a long time, watching twilight settle over Paris. Marcus's revelations completed the dismantling of my former reality. My sister's marriage, as fraudulent as my engagement. My father, orchestrating business mergers disguised as romantic unions. The pregnancy announcement, not just personal betrayal but breach of contract. The Everett family operated like a corporation with my father as CEO, appearances as its primary product, and truth as a negotiable commodity. I'd enabled this system my entire life. Defended it. Preserved it through silence and accommodation. Now I saw it clearly from the outside, stripped of emotional attachment. My phone buzzed with a message from Kate, Grandmere asking about your flight details. Seems stronger today. Still want me to pick you up from O'Hare tomorrow? I stared at her text, my packed suitcase looming in the corner of my apartment. The carefully constructed boundaries I'd planned to maintain during my Chicago visit suddenly seemed insufficient. I wasn't ready to re-enter that world of calculated appearances and emotional manipulation, even temporarily. Not as the person I was becoming in Paris. Not with this newfound clarity. I called Kate instead of texting back. I'm not coming tomorrow, I said when she answered. Postponing or canceling. Changing the terms. I'm not staying at the peninsula this time, or at my condo. I need neutral territory without family associations. You can stay with me, she offered immediately. And I need you to arrange something else. I want to see Grandmere alone. Not at the family estate. Somewhere my parents and Melissa won't be hovering. Claire. Kate hesitated. Are you sure that's realistic? She's not well. I'll handle the medical details. Just find me a private meeting place. A hotel suite, a friend's apartment, anything. I'll figure something out, she promised. What changed? I thought of Marcus's cold dissection of his arrangement with Melissa. Of Angela's evidence of David's year-long deception. Of my father's strategic management of family crises. I found my lines, I said simply. The boundaries I won't cross again. After we hung up, I opened my sketchbook to a fresh page and began writing, not drawing, not planning, but articulating for the first time what I wanted. From my career, from relationships, from myself. By morning, I had a different kind of exhibition taking shape, not the safe, academic showcase I'd originally planned, but a deeply personal collection. Family artifacts, I wrote at the top of the page, followed by concepts for multimedia pieces incorporating family photographs, recorded conversations, legal documents, and my new paintings. An artistic excavation of the Everett family mythology. A public examination of private deceptions. The ultimate violation of our cardinal rule: never let outsiders see behind the facade. It would be months of work. Painful, exhilarating work. Work that would either liberate me completely or sever my family connections permanently. Perhaps both. I sent a final message to Kate before boarding my flight, arriving tomorrow as planned. Book me a suite at the Roby. And find a private gallery space I can rent for the summer. I'm coming home to work. Have you ever realized that true independence sometimes requires returning to face what you've fled, but on entirely your own terms? The Roby Hotel offered the perfect symbolic distance, close enough to monitor Grandmere's condition, far enough from Lake Forest to maintain independence. From my corner suite, Chicago's skyline glittered like a familiar constellation, beautiful but remote. Kate had outdone herself, securing not just accommodations but a meeting with the director of Rona Hoffman Gallery, who offered their small project space for a summer exhibition. They're intrigued by your concept, she reported. Family deconstruction through mixed media has commercial appeal. Grandmere's doctor confirmed she could travel short distances. I arranged for a private nurse to bring her to the hotel the day after my arrival, giving me time to prepare the suite, fresh flowers, her favorite macarons from Vanille Patisserie, a chair positioned to maximize the view without taxing her strength. When she arrived, I barely recognized her. 2 months had hollowed her cheeks and dimmed the sharp intelligence in her eyes. But her back remained straight as the nurse helped her to the prepared chair. Claire. She extended her hand, papery skin stretched over blue veins. You look different. Paris changes people, I replied, kissing her cheek. Not Paris. She studied me carefully. Clarity. The nurse discreetly withdrew to the adjoining room, leaving us in privacy tempered by medical supervision. Your paintings, Grandmere said, pulling her iPad from her handbag. You've returned to your art. Yes. Because of the betrayal? Or despite it? Direct as always. No pretense of ignorance about David and Melissa. She waved dismissively. Of course I know. Your father thinks I'm senile as well as sick. The nurse's gossip. I listen. She tapped the iPad screen, bringing up one of my paintings. This is honest work. Your first in many years. I couldn't create while maintaining appearances, I admitted. It required too much energy. The Everett family disease. She reached for my hand. Your grandfather had it too. Constructed a perfect public image at the expense of private joy. I watched your father inherit this sickness, then you. Not Melissa? Melissa never caught it. She performs without believing the performance. You believed it, absorbed it, let it become your identity. I poured her tea, processing this reframing of our family dynamic. Why didn't you say something sooner? Would you have listened? She sipped delicately. Some lessons cannot be taught, only learned through pain. I tried to show you another path, through art, through Paris, through stories of my own mistakes. But you needed to discover your own way out. I'm creating an exhibition, I told her. About the family. About truth versus appearance. Her eyes sparked with familiar mischief. Thomas will be furious. Yes. Good. She set down her cup with a decisive click. Now, tell me your plan. Not for the exhibition, for your life. For the next hour, I outlined my vision, remaining in Chicago long enough to create the exhibition, then returning to Paris to complete the residency. Using my curator connections to secure representation for my own work. Selling my ownership stake in the gallery to finance this transition. She listened intently, occasionally asking piercing questions that forced me to refine vague ideas into concrete steps. When I finished, she nodded once. You've considered the financial implications? Yes. I'll have enough from the condo and gallery shares to support myself for 2 years. After that, my work must sustain me. And if it doesn't? Then I'll adapt. But on my terms. Good. She reached for her handbag again, withdrawing an envelope. This will help secure your independence while you establish yourself. Inside was a bank statement for an account I didn't recognize, holding a sum that made me blink. Your trust fund, she explained. Not the one your father controls, a separate one I established when you were born. It matures on your 37th birthday or upon my death, whichever comes first. Grandmere, no arguments. Her tone allowed no discussion. I made similar arrangements for Melissa, which she accessed years ago for her first wedding. You deserved the same opportunity, but were too responsible to ask. The nurse reappeared, checking her watch meaningfully. We must conclude our business, Grandmere said. I've updated my will. Most of my collection goes to the Art Institute, but certain pieces are reserved for you, those we discussed during our museum visits. Choose the ones that speak to your new path. I don't want you planning for death, I protested. Nonsense. I've been planning for death since your grandfather's funeral. It's the ultimate curatorial project. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Now, one final matter. Your parents and sister expect you to visit Lake Forest tomorrow. Your father has orchestrated a family reconciliation scene, with appropriate lighting and emotional cues. How do you know this? He rehearsed his speech in my sitting room, not realizing I was awake. Her smile turned razor-sharp. It's quite moving, appeals to family unity, shared history, bloodlines transcending mistakes. Very effective emotional manipulation. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What would you advise? I would never presume to advise a fellow artist on her creative decisions. She signaled the nurse to help her stand. But I will observe that revolution is rarely achieved through committee meetings. As the nurse helped her toward the door, Grandmere paused for a final remark. Whatever you decide, make it a choice, not a reaction. That's the difference between freedom and merely changing prisons. After she left, I stood at the window watching her car disappear into traffic. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Family dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m. Car will collect you at 6:30. Your mother has prepared your favorite meal. The perfect staging for reconciliation, just as Grandmere had warned. For a moment, I considered going, playing my assigned role one last time, maintaining peace while secretly planning my exhibition. The path of least resistance. Instead, I texted Kate, need your help tomorrow. Collecting items from my condo and the family estate while everyone's expecting me at dinner. Her response came immediately, breaking and entering our own properties? Then I answered my father, I won't be coming to dinner. My lawyer will contact you regarding access to my remaining belongings. Please respect my decision. I turned off my phone before he could reply, then opened my laptop to outline my exhibition more precisely. Family artifacts. Appearance versus reality would require specific items, photographs, documents, recordings, objects with layered meanings. Some I already possessed, others remained in family properties, requiring strategic retrieval. By midnight, I'd created a detailed inventory, items needed, their locations, their significance within the narrative I was constructing. Not a bitter exposé but a thoughtful examination of how families create and maintain myths that both protect and imprison their members. The next evening, Kate arrived driving a rented van, dressed entirely in black. Excessive, I observed, pointing to her outfit. I'm method acting as your accomplice. She handed me a spare key to my condo. David moved out last week, according to the doorman. Your security code still works. We drove first to the condo, where I efficiently collected personal papers, irreplaceable photographs, and the external hard drive containing my private journals. The space felt smaller than I remembered, cluttered with memories I no longer needed to preserve. 15 minutes until the family gathers for dinner, Kate noted, checking her watch. The estate should be minimally staffed. The drive to Lake Forest passed in tense silence. As we approached the wrought iron gates, Kate turned to me. Last chance to back out. Keep the engine running, I replied, entering the security code. The estate was eerily quiet, most staff occupied with dinner preparations in the main house. I led Kate through the garden entrance to the pool house, which had been converted to storage for family archives, photographs, documents, videotapes of family events, artifacts too meaningful to discard but too revealing to display. 5 minutes, Kate warned, standing lookout at the door. I worked methodically, collecting the items from my inventory, the unretouched family portrait from 1995, before my father had the photographer edit out Melissa's teenage scowl. The original manuscript of my mother's family history, with its honest first draft before publicists sanitized it for publication. A shoebox of letters between my parents during their early courtship, revealing the business arrangement that preceded their official love story. Car coming up the drive, Kate hissed. Black Mercedes. My father's. I grabbed the final item, a VHS tape labeled Melissa's 6th birthday, unedited, and hurried to the door. We slipped out through the garden, ducking behind topiary as my father's car pulled up to the main entrance. Through the windows, I glimpsed my mother emerging from the front door, dressed for dinner, her expression a practiced mask of welcome hiding obvious tension. Kate and I crept along the perimeter of the property until we reached the service gate, slipping through just as lights illuminated the main house windows. Dinner would proceed without me, a carefully orchestrated reunion now transformed into a strategy session for containing my defection. Back in the van, Kate exhaled sharply. That was unnecessarily stressful. But necessary. I glanced at the boxes of retrieved material, physical evidence of the gap between public narrative and private reality. This is how I break the cycle. They'll try to stop you, she warned. The exhibition could damage reputations, business relationships. I know. I touched the Melissa's birthday tape, documentation of the moment my parents first openly favored her over me, edited out of the official family record. That's why it has to be art, not accusation. Universal, not just personal. Beautiful enough that they can't dismiss it as mere revenge. And if they still try to shut it down? Then I'll know I'm on the right path. I watched the estate disappear in the side mirror as we drove away. Grandmere says revolution never happens through committee meetings. Kate laughed. I always liked that old woman. At the Roby, we unloaded our collected artifacts, arranging them across the suite like archaeological findings. Each object contained multitudes, the public story it was meant to tell and the private truth it actually revealed. What happens next? Kate asked, surveying the evidence of decades of careful curation. I start creating. I picked up a family photograph, the four of us posed on the lake house dock, smiling identically practiced smiles. And I stop reacting. For the first time since Melissa's wedding announcement, I felt neither anger nor hurt, just clarity of purpose. The exhibition would be my declaration of independence, not my declaration of war. The difference was crucial. My phone, now turned back on, buzzed with messages from my parents and Melissa. I ignored them, opening instead an email from Grandmere's nurse. She enjoyed your visit immensely. Says to tell you she's holding on until your exhibition opens. I wouldn't miss her liberation for anything. Have you ever discovered that the most powerful response to manipulation isn't confrontation but creation? Scene 7. 6 months of intensive work transformed raw materials into revelation. Family artifacts. Appearance versus reality occupied the Rona Hoffman project space with careful precision, each piece positioned to create dialogue between official narratives and hidden truths. Grandmere's health stabilized enough for her to attend the private preview. Seated in a wheelchair by the central installation, a deconstructed family portrait rendered in layers of transparent fabric, each revealing different versions of the same scene, she nodded in silent approval. They're coming, Kate murmured, checking her phone. Your father reserved a block of tickets for the opening. Bringing the family lawyer too. Of course he did. I straightened my simple black dress, no Everett family designer labels, just clean lines and quiet confidence. Let them come. The exhibition had already generated buzz in Chicago's art circles. My transformation from respected curator to confrontational artist intrigued collectors and critics alike. Advance reviews used words like unflinching, revelatory, and universally resonant, exactly the framing I'd intended. Not a bitter daughter's revenge, but an artistic examination of family mythology that transcended the personal while remaining emotionally authentic. When my parents and Melissa entered, the gallery fell momentarily silent. My mother in Chanel, my father in his bespoke suit, Melissa visibly pregnant in a flowing dress clearly selected to emphasize her condition. A united front of Everett family dignity confronting potential scandal. I approached them directly, curator's smile firmly in place. Welcome to the exhibition. Please explore at your own pace. Claire, my mother began, her voice pitched for public ears. We're so proud. No performances tonight, I interrupted quietly. Just honest engagement with the work. I left them standing at the entrance and rejoined Grandmere, who watched with undisguised fascination as my father moved methodically through the space, examining each piece, reading each description, his expression betraying nothing. He's calculating damage control, she observed. Identifying which revelations can be dismissed as artistic license versus documented truth. Let him try, I said, squeezing her shoulder gently. The heart of the exhibition was a multimedia installation titled Selective Memory, family videos playing on multiple screens, official versions juxtaposed with unedited footage, revealing the careful construction of our public image. Melissa's 6th birthday featured prominently, the moment she knocked over her cake in a tantrum, and my father's unguarded reaction. Claire would never embarrass us like this. I watched as Melissa stopped before this piece, her hand unconsciously resting on her rounded stomach. For a moment, something like recognition flickered across her features, not anger at the exposure, but awareness of the patterns we'd both been trapped within. She turned, finding me across the room, and held my gaze without her usual performance of emotion. A simple acknowledgement passed between us, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but mutual recognition of a shared history now honestly depicted. My father completed his circuit and approached. "Impressive work," he said, his voice carefully modulated. "Though perhaps certain private matters might have been handled with more discretion." "This isn't about discretion," I replied. "It's about truth. Truth is subjective, especially in families. That's exactly the point of the exhibition." He glanced at the growing crowd of collectors, critics, and gallery patrons. "What do you hope to accomplish with this exposure?" "Liberation," I said simply. "For myself, primarily. But perhaps for others too." I nodded toward Melissa, now examining a piece built around her wedding announcements, both marriages juxtaposed with the private arrangements that underpinned them. "And after tonight?" he asked. "I return to Paris next week. Continue creating. On my terms." He nodded once, acknowledgement rather than approval. "Your grandmother would be proud." "I already am," Grandmere interjected, her voice strong despite her frailty. "Now stop trying to manage this moment, Thomas, and actually look at what your daughter has created." The evening continued, art world luminaries mingling with family ghosts made tangible through my work. I moved through the space feeling strangely weightless, no longer defined by betrayal or family obligation, but by creative agency and hard-won authenticity. Later, as the crowd thinned, Kate found me by the small self-portrait that concluded the exhibition, the only purely forward-looking piece in the collection. "So," she said, "liberation achieved?" I considered the question, watching my family prepare to depart, separate cars, separate destinations, the careful Everett coordination visibly absent. "Not achieved," I corrected. "Begun." Have you ever realized that true freedom isn't a destination but a practice, one you must choose again each day?